Chapter 14. Bound. Riding through the city at night was strange. After everything they had seen and been through, it was hard to look at the streets the same way. Again, their perception of their own home had dramatically been altered. Now it seemed sad in an entirely new way, like a dream that had never really existed at all. Everything was quiet but for the sound of their idle conversation. At first riding in silence, they had broken the pattern and begun telling stories of favorite memories. "You wouldn't believe it if you'd seen it, Alice. It was insane, some of the things that this guy used to get me into," Dexter was saying. Milo was laughing in wonder of what story he might decide to tell. "It couldn't have been that bad," said Alice. "It was pretty bad, actually," Milo retorted. "Well, then get on with it. What did he do?" she asked, turning towards Dexter. "All right," began Dexter. "So, Milo and I are having an incredibly boring day, like a lot of the time. But then, he convinces me that we should play tag." "What an awful idea," said Milo, laughing. "I don't get it," agreed Alice. Milo, in his genius, wanted to play tag with the lights turned out. We'd played hide and seek in the dark before, so why not go ahead and see what tag was like without the lights too, right? "I guess that is a little dangerous, but I still don't see what the big deal is." "What you don't understand, though," said Dexter while trying to get Milo to shut up and quit laughing, "is how much breakable shit there is in Milo's store." "Oh no," said Alice. "Yeah, I'm sure you can see how that might be something of a problem," said Dexter. Milo finally calmed himself to join the conversation. "The entire shop was a disaster, but we didn't even realize it until the lights came back on, halfway through the game. We were just focused on playing. We didn't even stop to think about how we were knocking into everything. Then the lights come on, and it's his parents," continued Dexter. "We stop dead in our tracks and see the mess for the first time. We must have hit every shelf in there because it was all over the place. Broken this, broken that. We'd really done a number on the whole place." "You must have gotten into trouble," said Alice with a grin. "You would think so," said Milo. "You didn't?" she asked. "Milo always tried very gallantly to get us out of trouble once he got us into it," said Dex. "He went straight to work trying to explain what had happened and why it wasn't our fault." "I think I told them that we couldn't figure out why the lights wouldn't come on, and we'd stumbled around in the dark trying to find our way back outside," Milo said, beginning to laugh again. "It was ridiculous," said Dexter. "Hey, it got us out of it. All we had to do was help clean up. That's really only because your parents were astonished that you had tried to make them believe that story. They gave in because they thought it was funny." "It still worked," said Milo. Alice watched them in bewilderment as the sound of the tracks on the ground took over for a moment. "You guys are weird," she said. "Well, what about you? Don't you have any good stories like that?" asked Dexter. "Well, I guess so," she started coyly. "But I don't really know if they're that interesting." "Go ahead. We've got plenty of time to hear them before we get back home," said Milo. "All right," she started. "When I was small still, my mother—" "Keep going." "My adoptive mother," Alice trailed off. "Your mother," Milo urged. "Right." Alice tried to compose herself. "My mother used to have a friend. She'd come over and drive my mom crazy. Every time her friend would leave, my mother would spend an hour talking about how much she disliked this woman." "I think I can see where this is going," said Dexter through a smile. "So, One evening, this poor lady comes over. She's watching me in the living room. But I guess kids always repeat what they hear. Alice herself began to laugh. I still remember her face when I told her that my mom said she was stupid and annoying. Dexter and Milo both burst out in giggles, and Alice joined them. Dexter nearly lost control of the tractor, but quickly grabbed a hold of the levers and kept them on track. That's fantastic, said Dexter through tears of joy. It wasn't funny to her. She screeched like a parrot and went running out of the house, yelling at my mom. Did you get in trouble for it? Asked Milo. Alice scrunched her face and tried to remember. I guess I didn't. My mother was probably just happy she didn't have to see her again. They all burst into laughter, and it seemed as if all their worries were miles away. All right, Milo, it's your turn, said Alice. The mirth drained from Milo's face as he looked back. He tried to start, but found nothing to say. You don't have to tell a story, Milo. I just thought you would want to. It's not that I don't want to. I do. It's just that I remembered something else. Milo put his thoughts together. One of the last times I spoke to Dad. Was I there? Asked Dexter. No, not this time, said Milo. It was just him and me. Well, can you tell us? Asked Dexter, always ready to console his friend. Well, he had started acting weird, like something was going on. But I just thought it was something to do with missing Mom, or some other thing like that. But he'd been talking about the way people were going missing all the time. It reminded him of the nature of death. He was trying to compare it to how 1 minute you can be here, another you might not be. And he called me over to the fireplace and told me to consider the flames. Dexter had slowed the dozer to a near crawl and was paying full attention to Milo, as was Alice. He said that I would be able to hear my grandpa's voice in the hiss of the fire if I listened closely enough, and that I might notice his face in the flames if I knew what to look for. It was the most baffling thing he ever said to me, and I worried he might have been losing his mind at the time, but he smiled at me. He told me that he heard Grandpa all the time, and that I just wasn't listening closely enough. I guess some of it makes sense now. I guess that's why I thought of it. You said you saw your dad, Dexter exclaimed. Yeah, I guess maybe I did. Milo closed his eyes and conjured up the image he had seen of the white ghost that followed him on their journey through Crowhaven. Again, it seemed to hover there in his mind's eye until the moment he pulled his lids apart and looked back out on the city. He couldn't help but to smile. You know what it is I remember? I remember playing catch in the streets of an evening, and how much of a good time we used to have when both of our dads would come out after supper and join us. I remember trying to help them work on stuff, and not knowing what we were doing, and not being strong enough to help with much of anything. I remember things like that. Dexter smiled too and put his arm around Milo's shoulder. They had been as close as brothers for the entirety of their lives, and had been on the roller coaster of life together since the start. When Milo needed help understanding himself and choosing the right path, Dexter was always there like a lighthouse on the beach. When Dexter needed Milo for anything at all, Milo did his best to put the pieces together. They had conquered their city together. I'm really glad I met you guys, said Alice suddenly. Us? Asked Dexter, skeptically. Yes, you guys. I would have been incredibly lost if we hadn't found each other when we did. I might have just stayed there and died. Or been picked up by Elite and made into one of their awful creatures. You guys saved me. Well, we needed each other, that's for sure, said Dexter. We saved each other plenty of times back there, mentally and physically. You guys are all that I have in the world, said Milo. I wish Victor and his wife could have made it out with us, said Alice, looking back up the road. They definitely deserve to make it out of here just as much as we do. They weren't even part of Crowhaven. Imagine being pulled into this mess from the outside, Milo responded. It's not fair. Milo struggled to keep the memory of Victor pulling the trigger on his wife and himself from flashing in his mind by focusing on the broken street lamps that lined the city sidewalks. He tried to imagine them aglow when the city was a younger place. It gave him some small sense of warmth. Victor wanted us to make it out of here. Those were his last words to me. Well, that's what we're going to do, said Dexter. But Alice was looking at something in the distance. What's that? She asked. It's a gate. We'll have to go through. But what about the guns? They'll kill us before we even get close, screamed Alice in a panic. Milo, if you see the guns, try and shoot them. It's the only way we can get home in this thing. Milo took the gun from Dexter's back and made sure it was loaded. Anxiously, they approached the gate with an increase in speed, as Dexter mashed the throttle. The tractor growled and hissed as it breathed smoke and diesel fuel. They aren't shooting, cried Milo. From atop of the surrounding buildings and the gate itself could be seen the machine guns just sitting limp. Milo wasn't sure if it calmed him or made him uneasy. Go through the gate, he screamed. Don't slow down. Dexter obliged as best he could and lowered the bucket to prepare for another impact. But this time the wall was old and weakened concrete and crumbled easily at the collision. They burst through to the other side with a victorious blow that barely even jolted them from where they clinched tightly to the bulldozer. Why do you suppose they didn't shoot at us like before? Asked Dexter, and Milo gave it some hard thought. Maybe when Alice disconnected Deyanira from the security computers, it messed up everything in town. I don't know. That's incredible, Alice murmured. That's very fortunate is what it is, said Dexter, matter-of-factly. You know what I'll never forget? Asked Milo. This entire journey home.